They thought she was a savior, but behind closed doors, she was something else entirely. A woman praised on every screen, celebrated in every community, honored by leaders and loved by the poor, was quietly building an empire of secrets. Her name was Madam Charity, but those who truly knew her whispered another name, Madam Cash. In the silence of the night, far from the cameras and applause, decisions were made that no one would ever imagine. Young virgin girls were countless in her hotel. She adopted little children, calling herself Big Mommy, a mother to the motherless, and her stories were carefully scripted. No one asked questions because no one suspected the truth. By morning, she was dressed in elegance again, stepping out of her mansion with confidence, her face glowing with kindness, her voice soft and convincing. She spoke about hope, about empowering girls, about giving children a future. And the world listened. They always listened. Madam Charity was known everywhere. She traveled from village to village with her team, promising opportunity and a better life. She would stand before struggling families and speak words that sounded like miracles. Education, skills, independence, a new beginning. And many believed her because she gave just enough proof to silence doubt. Her organization, widely known as Madam Charity NGO, was officially registered and recognized. It had awards, certificates, and endorsements from powerful institutions. Leaders from different backgrounds praised her efforts. Religious figures blessed her work. Influential people stood beside her in public events. She had built an image that was almost untouchable. Every festive season, her generosity became even louder. Trucks filled with food items, clothes, and equipment would enter communities. People sang her praises. Mothers prayed for her. Children smiled because of her gifts. Cameras captured every moment, and her name spread even further. But behind that generosity was careful control. Every interview was planned. Every testimony was written. The girls under her care were trained not just in skills, but in what to say and how to say it. When the press arrived, they spoke of transformation and gratitude, reading lines that had already been prepared for them. And the world applauded again. Madam Charity understood one thing very well. Perception was power. She invested heavily in influence. Lawyers, media personnel, security officers, and insiders in different systems. Anyone who could protect her image or silence a threat was already within her reach. Loyalty was bought, and silence was rewarded. There were rumors, of course, about her giving young female virgins to male politicians, and they pay her in dollars. There are always rumors when someone rises too fast. But every accusation disappeared as quickly as it came. Cases were dismissed. Investigations went cold. People who tried to speak either changed their story or disappeared from the spotlight completely. She lived in luxury, moving with convoys, flying in private jets, dining with the elite. And yet, she still returned to the villages, still smiled for the cameras, still carried children in her arms as if she truly cared. It was a perfect performance. Until the day something shifted. She traveled abroad for what she called a strategic partnership. It was supposed to strengthen her influence even more. She had planned meetings, including one with a powerful leader. But when she arrived, things did not go as expected. For the first time in a long time, she was denied access. Security officers stopped her at the gate, informing her that only top global political figures were allowed entry during that period. She stood there, surprised, not because she was rejected, but because she was not recognized at that level of power. That moment stayed with her. On her flight back, seated in silence inside her private jet, she stared out the window and began to think deeply. Wealth, influence, admiration, she had all of it. But there was something she did not have. Power. Real power. The kind that could not be questioned, the kind that could not be stopped. And right there, above the clouds, Madam Charity made a decision that would change everything. She would no longer operate behind the scenes. She would step into the highest position possible. She would become the leader of the nation. And with that decision, a new chapter of her life began, one that would bring her even closer to the spotlight and dangerously closer to exposure.
Madam Charity returned from her trip quieter than usual, but inside her a storm was rising. She had seen the limits of influence without authority, and she was no longer satisfied with being celebrated. She wanted to be untouchable. Within weeks, meetings began behind closed doors, not charity meetings this time, but strategy sessions. Political analysts, media experts, loyal lawyers, and powerful allies gathered around her. Plans were drawn, timelines were created, money began to move quietly. Then, one morning, the announcement broke. Madam Charity was stepping into politics. The news spread like wildfire. Social media exploded with videos of her past good works. Old clips of her giving, speaking, and helping were reposted again and again. People did not see a politician, they saw a savior stepping forward. Women supported her passionately, young people admired her confidence. Communities she had visited felt personally connected to her. It did not even feel like a campaign, it felt like a movement. She registered her political party and began her journey. But unlike others, she did not need to struggle for attention. The attention was already hers. Everywhere she went, crowds gathered, songs were composed in her name, banners filled the streets. Her face became impossible to ignore. Behind the scenes, however, the story was very different. She was not leaving anything to chance. Every speech was carefully written, every appearance was calculated. Influencers were paid to promote her. Media houses were quietly aligned. Even her opponent's weaknesses were being studied in detail. And then there was the man who knew too much, the current president. To the public, he was her biggest opponent, but in secret, their history was complicated. He had once moved within her circle, benefiting from the hidden side of her empire. He knew things, dangerous things. At first, he did not take her seriously. He believed her popularity would fade once real politics began. But as weeks passed, he saw something alarming. She was not slowing down. She was gaining more ground every day. Poll numbers shifted. Influential figures began to switch sides. Even members within his own circle started speaking of her as the next leader. Fear crept in. Not just fear of losing power, but fear of what she might do with it. So he made his first move. He reached out to her privately. It was not a threat, it was an offer. A blank check. Any amount she wanted, as long as she stepped down. But Madam Charity did not hesitate. She refused. Calmly, confidently, she told him that money was not her interest anymore. She had enough of that. What she wanted now was control. That answer changed everything. From that moment, they were no longer just opponents, they became enemies. The president began to fight back, but not in ways the public could easily see. Investigations were reopened, old cases that had been buried suddenly returned. Government agencies began to look into her activities. She was summoned to court multiple times, but she never showed up. Her lawyers handled everything, and they always won. Every case collapsed, every accusation faded. It was as if the system itself could not hold her. The president grew frustrated. He tried another approach, media exposure. Secret journalists were sent to dig into her life, to find anything that could bring her down. But somehow, every attempt failed. Information leaked before they could act. Stories disappeared before they were published. It was clear she had eyes everywhere. She was always one step ahead. Meanwhile, her campaign only grew stronger. She stood on stages speaking about change, about justice, about giving power back to the people. Her voice carried emotion, her words felt real, and people believed her. The more she spoke, the more dangerous she became. The president realized that ordinary tactics would not work. He needed something deeper, something closer. That was when the plan changed. If he could not break her from the outside, he would enter from within. A young girl appeared on the street one evening, crying, alone and looking helpless. Her story was simple. No family, no support, nowhere to go. It was the kind of story Madam Charity never ignored. As expected, her convoy stopped. She stepped out, spoke gently to the girl, and offered her help. Within hours, the girl was taken into her system. Her name was Angela. What Madam Charity did not know was that Angela was not just another rescue. She was a carefully planted piece in a dangerous game. Hidden within her was a device, one that could see and hear everything. For the first time in a long time, someone was inside Madam Charity's world without her control. And far away, behind secured walls, the president watched and listened. At first, nothing unusual appeared. The same routines, the same controlled environment, the same carefully managed image. But slowly, pieces began to fall out of place. Private conversations, hidden instructions, movements that did not match the public story. The deeper Angela stayed, the clearer the truth became. And for the first time, Madam Charity's perfect world began to crack. But even then, she had no idea. She continued her campaign, smiling, waving, speaking of hope, while the very foundation of her empire was quietly being exposed. The countdown had begun, and soon the world would see what had been hidden for so long.
The fall of Madam Charity did not begin with noise. It began with silence. A quiet gathering in a secured room, screens glowing in the dark, a few trusted officials seated, watching, listening, saying nothing. On those screens were fragments of a life the public had never seen. Private conversations, hidden movements, instructions given in low tones, decisions made without mercy. For years she had controlled every narrative, but now, for the first time, the story was no longer in her hands. Angela had become invisible within her world. She followed instructions, stayed quiet, observed everything. Madam Charity trusted her, just like she had trusted many others before. But this time, the trust was different. It was dangerous. Each day, more information was gathered. Patterns were revealed. Networks were exposed. What once looked like charity now began to look like control, manipulation, a carefully built system designed to serve her hidden interests. And still, outside, nothing had changed. Campaign rallies continued, crowds increased, her voice echoed across cities and villages. Her supporters defended her fiercely. "She is the hope we have been waiting for," they said. "No one can stop her," others replied. But behind the scenes, something unstoppable was already moving. The president had waited long enough. He knew the timing had to be perfect. Too early, and she would escape. Too late, and she might win. So he made the call. The evidence would be released, not in pieces, but all at once. The day started like any other. Madam Charity was preparing for a major public address. Cameras were ready. Her team moved around her with urgency. Everything was in place. Then suddenly, the world shifted.
Across multiple media platforms, a report began to spread. At first, people ignored it, another rumor, they thought, another failed attempt to bring her down. But this time was different. The report was detailed, clear, supported by recordings, voices that sounded too familiar, conversations that could not be denied, movements that raised serious questions. Within hours, the story was everywhere. Television stations interrupted their programs. Social media flooded with reactions. Supporters became confused. Critics became louder. Madam Charity watched it unfold in disbelief. For the first time, she was not prepared. She tried to respond quickly. Denial, damage control, emergency meetings. Her lawyers were called. Her media team rushed to create counter-narratives. But it was too much. The evidence was not weak. It was direct. And worse, it kept coming. More clips, more voices, more proof. The image she had built over the years began to collapse in a matter of days. Crowds that once cheered her now questioned her. Allies who once stood beside her slowly stepped away. Even within her own circle, fear began to spread. Then came the final blow. A particular recording surfaced, one that did not just expose her, but connected her to powerful figures who had once operated in secrecy. And among those figures was the president himself, the same man who had been fighting to stop her, the same man who had tried to destroy her. Now, his own image was being dragged into the light. The nation stood still. Shock turned into outrage. People demanded answers, not just from Madam Charity, but from the entire system. It was no longer a political battle. It had become a national crisis. The authorities had no choice. Action had to be taken. Madam Charity was arrested. The woman who once moved with convoys and power was now surrounded by officers, her movements controlled, her voice restricted. Cameras that once followed her for admiration now captured her downfall. Inside the interrogation room, she remained silent at first, calm, observing, calculating. But the evidence was placed before her, one after another. There was no escape this time, no influence strong enough, no system left to hide behind. And slowly, she began to speak. Not out of weakness, but out of realization. The game was over. She confessed. She spoke about the structure she had built, the people involved, the strategies used, the secrets that had remained hidden for years. And she did not stop there. She mentioned names, powerful names, including the president. The confession shook the nation even further. The leader who had tried to expose her now was exposed himself. Pressure mounted. The legislative body acted, investigations expanded, and within a short time, the president was removed from office. It was a moment no one had expected. Two powerful figures, both fallen. But the story did not end in darkness. From the chaos, a new leader emerged. The vice president, a man known for his calm nature and clear principles, stepped forward. His name was Mr. Christian Andrew. He addressed the nation with a steady voice, not with promises, but with commitment. He spoke about rebuilding trust, about restoring integrity, about placing the people first. Many listened with caution. After everything that had happened, trust was no longer easy to give. But there was something different about him, something steady, something real. Meanwhile, Madam Charity faced the consequences of her actions. The court proceedings were long, detailed, and closely followed by the public. In the end, judgment was passed. Life imprisonment. The woman who once controlled everything now lived within walls she could not escape. Her name, once celebrated, became a lesson, a reminder that not everything that shines is pure, a warning that even the most perfect image can hide the deepest secrets. And somewhere, far from the noise, people began to reflect, not just on her story, but on how easily they had believed. Because in the end, Madam Charity did not rise alone. She was lifted by trust, and she fell when that trust was finally broken.
This is Beyond Stories, where every story carries a lesson, and every lesson touches the heart. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could inspire your next step.